I want you to picture a very specific board game sitting on your shelf right now.
Oh, I think we all have one.
Right. You probably know the exact one I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Is that one gathering, just a very noticeable layer of dust.
Yep.
You bought it. You were incredibly excited when you finally brought it home. You punched out all the little cardboard tokens.
Look, that's part.
It is the best part.
Yeah.
But every single time you try to actually play it with your group, it just, it completely falls flat.
Yeah, it just fizzles.
Exactly. The rules take way too long to explain. People get frustrated, and it inevitably just dies halfway through, leaving you with this strange little cardboard box of guilt.
It is a remarkably universal experience, honestly. I mean, almost everyone has that one game they feel intensely guilty about not playing.
And today, we're going to figure out exactly why that happens. But more importantly, we're looking at how to actually fix it.
Which is so needed.
We're taking a deep dive into excerpts from the Strategic Guide to Contextual Board Game Recommendations. And this is based on the framework developed by PicksByGame.com.
Right.
The core mission of this deep dive is to understand why our game nights fail and how a radical shift in the way we choose games can essentially guarantee a perfect experience every time you sit down at the table.
It really requires a complete reframing of how we consume this kind of entertainment. I mean, we've been trained to look for objective ratings, right? When we really should be looking for situational fit.
Okay, let's unpack this because the core statistic from our source material really sets the stage here. Right now, there are over 100,000 board games in print.
It's massive.
100,000. But despite that massive number, the average household only owns 3.
3, yeah. And that massive gap between the 100,000 available games and the 3 that people actually own, well, that's where everyone gets stuck.
Right.
Because the single biggest reason people stop playing board games isn't a lack of interest. It isn't that they suddenly, dislike having fun.
Nobody hates fun.
Exactly. The friction comes from buying the wrong game for their specific group. Like, you buy a game the internet insists is a perfect 10 out of 10. Right. But it's a deeply complex strategy game, and then you try to play it when grandma comes over for the holidays.
It's a disaster. Or you buy a game designed specifically for 4 players, but you really only ever play with your partner.
Yes.
The problem isn't the games themselves. It's the mismatch between the game and the context.
Yeah.
And to really solve the mystery of that dusty board game on your shelf, we have to look at the sheer scale of the market we're navigating here. Because traditional review scores are, honestly, they're leading us completely astray.
They are. And the scale is staggering when you actually look at the numbers. I mean, the global board game market is currently valued at $13.6 billion.
Wow.
And it's growing at a rate of 13% annually.
So this is definitely not some, niche basement hobby anyway.
Oh, far from it. 35% of American households played a board game in the last year.
That's huge.
But there's this fascinating divide in the data. While the average household only owns 3 games, the average modern board game owner owns between 15 and 20 games.
Okay, so it's like a cliff.
Yeah, it seems that once you crack the code and figure out how to buy the right games, you inevitably just start buying a lot more of them.
Which brings us directly to PicksByGame.com's core philosophy. They completely reject the traditional model of game recommendations.
Completely.
Their argument is that looking for what's trending or, searching for the universally best game is a fool's errand because a universally perfect game just doesn't actually exist.
Right, because a game is simply a tool to facilitate a social experience.
Yes, it's like buying a Ferrari to haul a family of 6.
That's a great way to put it.
The problem isn't that the Ferrari is a bad car. I mean, it's a beautiful, undeniable piece of engineering. The problem is structural. The physical mechanism of a 2-seat sports car cannot accommodate a family.
No, it can't.
The mismatch is built into the design. If you try to force a heavy, highly rated 4-player strategy game onto a Tuesday night with just your partner, you're going to be just as miserable as you would be trying to cram 6 people into that Ferrari.
What's fascinating here is how clearly this structural mismatch translates to the actual consumer satisfaction data.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The sweet spot for satisfaction is actually incredibly specific. Surveys of board game purchasers show that games priced between $20 and $50 consistently provide the highest satisfaction per dollar.
Wait, really? Not the massive $100 games?
Nope. You don't need to drop $100 on a huge box overflowing with plastic miniatures to have an unforgettable time. You
No.
need to spend that $20 to $50 on the exact right mechanical experience for the people sitting at your table.
Okay, so if getting the context right is the key to unlocking this whole hobby, how do we actually measure that?
That's a big question.
Right. And the source outlines 4 specific variables that the PicksByGame engine uses to filter recommendations. Let's start with what they call the ultimate deal breaker, player count.
Because games live and die by their player count. A 2-player game played at 4 players is not just a longer game, it is mechanically an entirely different game.
Yeah.
The source uses Wingspan as an example, which is, massively popular right now.
It's everywhere you see it at Target.
You do. But it's designed around building an engine of combos. At 2 players, the downtime between your turns is short, but the specific mechanics of how you interact with the shared resources can feel a bit stretched.
Oh, okay.
It's less tense than it does at 3 or 4 players, where the competition for those resources is much, much tighter. On the flip side, you have a game like Patchwork.
Which is, what, about $30?
Yeah.
And you are literally sewing a quilt, right?
Yes, exactly. You are piecing together Tetris-like shapes to build a quilt. But Patchwork is perfectly mathematically designed for exactly 2 players.
So you can't play with 3.
You literally can't. The economy of time and the buttons you spend to buy those pieces, it only balances if there is exactly 1 person sitting across from you. If you get the player count wrong, the core math of the game breaks. That has to be your very first filter.
Okay, so once you have a game that physically functions with the number of people in the room, what keeps them engaged without getting frustrated?
Time.
Right. That brings us to how we measure time, which is the second variable, duration. And the data here was a real wake-up call for me. The average successful game night lasts exactly 90 minutes.
Which is a crucial metric because it means the ideal game shouldn't actually say 90 minutes on the box.
Because you have to factor in the human element, right? You're socializing, you're grabbing snacks, someone has to explain the rules.
Always.
So to fit a game into a 90-minute social window, the actual play time of the game needs to be 30 to 45 minutes. The source argues that a scalable, snappy 30-minute game that you actually finish is infinitely better than a massive 90-minute epic that gets packed away at midnight when everyone is half asleep.
And that leads naturally into the third variable, which dictates how exhausted people will be at midnight, wait, or, cognitive demand.
Now, I think a lot of people hear the term wait in board gaming, and they immediately assume it just means rules complexity.
Right, like how many pages are in the rule book.
Exactly. But it's really about the mental energy required to engage with the mechanics. It's like reading.
Yeah.
If you sit down with a fast-paced airport thriller
versus sitting down to read a dense college textbook.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. They are both technically reading. You're looking at words on a page. But the mental state required to process that information is entirely different.
Yeah.
If your brain is fried after a 10-hour workday, you want the thriller.
Yeah.
If I hand you an award-winning textbook in that moment, you are going to reject it entirely.
You have to accurately read the room. There is a distinct, measurable difference between we have 2 hours and everyone is heavily caffeinated and fully bought in night, and it's 9 p.m. and we just had a huge dinner night.
Light games, your airport thrillers, they spark conversation. The mechanics are simple enough that people can chat while they play. Heavy games demand absolute focus.
It gets quiet.
The table goes entirely quiet because everyone is actively calculating their next 3 moves. The biggest mistake you can make is buying a medium-heavy game for a light game situation. It demands an energy the table just wasn't prepared to give.
Which sets up the fourth and final variable perfectly, context itself. It's the variable almost every other recommendation site ignores.
They really do.
You have to ask, what is the actual social function of this gathering? The right game for a quiet date night is fundamentally different from the right game for a corporate team-building retreat.
Precisely.
So we have this framework now: player count, duration, weight, and social context. Let's actually apply this to some real-world scenarios from the source, starting with what has to be the most common hurdle, the non-gamer or beginner scenario.
Yeah, the ultimate test.
You have friends over who actively claim they don't play board games.
The barrier here is usually a fear of looking foolish or, getting intensely competitive.
For this exact context, the source highlights Pandemic. It's a $45, 45-minute game. It is a cooperative game, meaning you are all playing together against the board itself.
Right.
You are a team of specialists actively trying to stop 4 diseases from spreading across a map of the globe.
The compounding threat in that game is incredibly tense.
It is. And mathematically, cooperative games like this has seen a 300% growth in sales over the last decade.
300%.
300%. The reason a game like Pandemic functions as the perfect gateway game is purely psychological. Losing together feels like winning.
Oh, that's interesting.
You completely remove the adversarial tension that turns a lot of non-gamers off. If the board beats you, you all just laugh about it together. So if cooperative games fix the beginner problem by removing that adversarial tension, how do we handle situations where the barrier isn't competition, but just pure attention span? I'm thinking of the family or grandparent scenario where you need a game with effectively a zero learning curve.
The ultimate recommendation there is Ticket to Ride.
Yeah.
$50, incredibly accessible.
You're claiming train routes across a map of America, right?
Yes. It has sold over 10 million copies, and the genius of the game lies in its mechanical simplicity. It is a set collection game. On your turn, you either draw colored train cards or you play a set of those colored cards to place your plastic trains on a matching route on the board.
And that's it.
That is effectively the entire game. The rules literally fit on a single page.
But there's still tension because there are limited routes. If I need to get from New York to Chicago and you claim the last track, I have to completely reroute my entire strategy.
Exactly. It plays completely seamlessly with an 8-year-old and a serious gamer sitting at the exact same table.
The source also highlights Codenames for that mixed-age family setting. $20, 15 minutes.
Codenames is fascinating because it's fundamentally a word association game.
You have a grid of random words on the table, and one person, the spy master, has to give a single word clue to get their team to guess specific words on that grid without guessing the opponent's words. The guide actually calls this the closest thing to a universal board game recommendation.
Because it relies on the subjective nature of language. It scales up to 8 or even 12 players easily, and it thrives on the chaotic way different generations interpret language.
Oh, I can see that.
The way a boomer connects 2 words is completely different from how a teenager connects them, which creates hilarious friction.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. We've covered families and beginners. Let's look at the it's already late scenario. You have 30 minutes or less, people are tired, but you want to play something. The standout recommendation here is a $15 card game called The Crew, Mission Deep Sea.
This is a brilliant piece of modern design. It's a cooperative trick-taking game.
Now wait, before we dive into the mechanics, for anyone listening who hasn't played The Crew, what exactly is a trick-taking game? Because usually, games in that genre like Hearts or Spades or Euchre, they're highly competitive.
That's right. In a standard trick-taking game, everyone plays one card from their hand to the center of the table, and whoever played the highest card of the matching suit takes the trick. They win those cards.
Right.
The Crew uses that exact same mechanical foundation but makes it fully cooperative.
Which sounds completely contradictory.
It does, but here's how it works. The game gives you specific missions. For example, a mission might say, Player 3 must win the trick containing the green 5.
Okay.
So the entire table has to play their cards in a way that guarantees Player 3 wins that specific trick. But, and this is the genius of the game, you are severely restricted in how you can communicate about the cards in your hand.
Right. The source notes there are 96 escalating missions. Mission 1 is incredibly easy, but Mission 50 will literally end a friendship. How does an $11 to $15 deck of cards generate that kind of emotional intensity?
It all comes down to that restricted communication, because you cannot just tell the table what you are holding. You have to deduce what your partner is thinking based entirely on the cards they choose to play.
That sounds stressful.
It is. Limiting player interaction in that very specific way forces a much deeper level of engagement. It creates this incredible absolute silence at the table where everyone is just staring at each other, trying to telepathically communicate through a piece of cardboard.
And that restricted communication mechanic carries over perfectly into another highly specific scenario, date night. Specifically, exactly 2 players, where you want an experience that feels a bit different from a standard game. The guide recommends Sky Team.
Sky Team is phenomenal. $30, 20 minutes. It is a cooperative game where you and your partner are the pilot and co-pilot trying to land a commercial airplane using dice placement.
And again, you cannot talk once the round starts.
Absolute silence. You roll your dice behind a screen, and then you take turns placing those dice onto a shared control panel on the board. You are adjusting the plane's flaps, deploying the landing gear, communicating with the control tower to clear planes out of your flight path.
All without saying a word. You are just placing a die and praying your partner rolled the right number to handle the brakes. The tension is exquisite.
And if you want a date night game that is highly competitive rather than cooperative, they recommend Seven Wonders Duel, $35. It's a head-to-head civilization builder.
The source calls it the tightest 30-minute two-player game in print. You are drafting cards from a shared pyramid in the center of the table. You can collect science symbols to win, or build up a military to physically push a token into your opponent's city to crush them.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Every single card you draft inherently reveals a new card for your opponent to take. It is a brilliant zero-sum tension.
It perfectly fits that two-player, 30-minute context with a medium cognitive weight. Every choice matters.
Okay, so you've successfully hooked your friends and your partner with these gateway games and filler games. Now, how do we handle the nights when everyone is fully committed? We're moving into the heavy hitters. Let's look at the standard 3 to 4 player game night where people want some meat on the bone.
This is where Wingspan truly shines. $60, 40 to 70 minutes. The theme is incredibly welcoming. You are building bird sanctuaries.
But the mechanics are deep. It's what's called an engine builder. And for the listener, an engine builder means you start the game doing very simple actions. Maybe you play a bird card that gets you a piece of food.
Right.
But by the middle of the game, that bird lets you get food, which lets you lay an egg, which lets you draw another card. You are literally building a mechanical engine that compounds your actions into massive, satisfying chain reactions.
And the source notes its emotional texture, which is a great phrase, because there is very little direct conflict. The game is contemplative rather than chaotic.
You're just doing your own thing.
Yeah, you are intensely focused on optimizing your own beautiful little ecosystem. Alongside that, for a standard night, is Azul, $40.
Azul is totally different. It's a tile drafting game where you are building a mosaic for a Portuguese palace. And it takes maybe 3 minutes to teach.
Right. But drafting here means you are taking tiles from a shared communal pool. And the tactile feel is a massive part of the appeal. It uses these beautiful, heavy ceramic quality tiles. But underneath that pretty exterior, the mechanics are surprisingly sharp.
Because whatever you don't draft gets pushed to the center.
Exactly. There is a subtle but very real blocking mechanic. When you draft the tiles you need to complete your mosaic, you are simultaneously calculating how to leave a massive pile of useless leftover tiles for your opponents.
It hurts.
It does. If they are forced to take them, those tiles actually cost them negative points. It's mechanically light, but highly, highly interactive.
All right, but let's say we want to go even deeper. The serious strategy night. Everyone is deeply invested, they've had their coffee, and they are ready to think. The guide brings up Root, $60, 60 to 90 minutes.
Root is widely considered a masterclass in what we call asymmetric game design. It presents itself with adorable woodland animal art, but it is actually a brutal war game.
Now, hold on, because I was reading the breakdown of this game in the source, and my brain sort of short-circuited.
It's a lot to take in.
It says one person plays as the cats, and their mechanics are basically Sin City. They're building sawmills and infrastructure. Another person plays as the birds, and they are playing a rigid programming and recruitment game. And a third person plays as the mice, and they are running a hidden guerrilla insurgency, all on the exact same board. Mathematically, how does that not just collapse into a completely broken, unplayable mess?
It sounds impossible, but if we connect this to the bigger picture of game design, asymmetry is actually the absolute peak of replayability when balanced correctly. You have 4 factions playing by completely different rules, drawing from different decks, scoring points in fundamentally different ways, but they are all interacting within the exact same shared ecosystem.
So the cats can't build their sawmills if the mice keep blowing them up.
Exactly. What this brilliantly allows is for players with vastly different psychological playstyles to share the same table while pursuing completely different cognitive puzzles.
Oh, that makes sense.
The player who loves building economic engines plays the cats. The player who loves strict long-term planning plays the birds. The player who loves chaos and disruption plays the mice. It satisfies multiple contexts at once.
That is wild. And for those serious groups who really want to commit, who have a dedicated game group that meets every week, the guide suggests a 3-game ultimate collection.
The Holy Trinity.
If you want to cover all your bases for heavy gaming, You get Wingspan for your contemplative engine-building nights. You get Spirit Island, which is an $80 cooperative game. The theme is reverse colonialism.
Yes, you play as ancient spirits defending an island from European invaders.
And because the invaders follow a rigid, predictable set of rules, the game demands total cognitive buy-in. You have to coordinate your spirit powers flawlessly to survive. And finally, you get Terraforming Mars, a $70 two-hour epic where you are managing heat and oxygen and oceans to literally colonize a planet. It satisfies that long arc, heavy strategy itch perfectly.
With just those 3 titles, you have optimized your collection for almost any serious, deep-focus gaming context. You don't need 100 games, you just need the right tools.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, the next time you are staring at a massive, overwhelming wall of cardboard at a local game store?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
It means you have to fundamentally stop asking what is the best game. That question is a trap that leads to dusty boxes on your shelf. Instead, you need to start asking, who is actually going to be at my table? How much time do we legitimately have? And what kind of mental energy are we bringing into the room tonight?
Exactly. The curated list of 50 titles on PicksByGame.com isn't just a database of every game ever made. It is definitive proof that context is everything. Every single game on that list earns its place, not by being universally perfect for everyone, but by being genuinely mechanically great in one specific targeted situation.
It's just about finding the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a hammer to turn a screw, and you shouldn't use a heavy, asymmetric war game for a light family gathering.
This does raise one final important question, though, and it's something that goes far beyond just having a successful game night.
What's that?
If we look closely at the data we discussed earlier, the fact that cooperative board game sales have exploded by 300% in the last 10 years. Games like Pandemic and SkyTeam and The Crew are proving that losing together feels significantly better than winning alone.
Yeah.
What does that massive shift actually say about our modern psychological needs?
Oh, wow. That's a fascinating angle.
In a world that is defined by intense, relentless, daily competition, whether that is at work, on social media, or just navigating the economy, are we slowly moving away from the desire to crush our friends at the game table? Are we perhaps just desperately looking for a safe, structured space to survive a difficult challenge together?
That is really something to chew on. The next time you look at that dusty box of guilt on your shelves, maybe you can let yourself off the hook. It wasn't a failure of the game, and it wasn't a failure of your friends. It was just the wrong context all along. Context is king. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.